8. McKenzie Shurilla. An Ohio teen named McKenzie Shurilla deliberately crashed her car into a building at 100 miles per hour, 161 kilometers per hour, during an argument with her boyfriend, 20-year-old Dominic Russo, in July of 2022. Russo and the couple's friend, 19-year-old Davian Flanagan, died at the scene, and emergency responders found Shurilla passed out behind the wheel with her foot on the gas. She underwent multiple surgeries but survived her injuries. The car was almost completely crushed from the impact of hitting the brick wall. Black box data from the vehicle revealed that Shurilla had the pedal pressed fully to the floor, and she made no attempts to slow down or stop. According to prosecutors, she had a documented history of threatening Russo and was angry on the day of the crash because they were on the outs. But Shurilla denied crashing on purpose. Her mother claimed that the crash resulted from a disorder that makes the young woman prone to fainting, while McKenzie's defense attorney argued that there's no way of knowing what was happening in the car, and that Russo may have been trying to grab the steering wheel. The jury found Shurilla guilty of 2 counts of murder, and as a punishment, she was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. During her sentencing hearing, she apologized to the victims' families, but once again claimed that she didn't deliberately cause the wreck, suggesting that she wasn't ready to take full responsibility for her actions. 7. Natalie Navaro. Police found 21-year-old Arturo Pena dead from a gunshot wound in Garland, Texas, while responding to a call about an unresponsive person in August 2023. And apparently, he'd been reported missing 2 days earlier. Investigators quickly zeroed in on 21-year-old Yordi Martinez and a young woman named Natalie Navaro as the top suspects in the case. A police spokesperson said that Pena had property that Navaro and Martinez wanted, but declined to go into further detail. Shortly after warrants were issued for the suspects, Dallas police issued an alert to the public in search of Navaro, who'd reportedly disappeared under suspicious circumstances. The alert listed Martinez as an at-large suspect in the young woman's disappearance, and it's unclear whether the agency was aware that the pair were wanted for murder. Navaro was found in Webb County, which sits along the U.S.-Mexican border, and is being held in custody on a capital murder charge. But unfortunately, Martinez remains at large. Authorities believe he may have fled to Mexico in an attempt to evade the police. But they're hoping members of the public will come forward and help locate him so he can be brought to justice. 6. Eric Scott Sills. Eric Scott Sills was a world-renowned fertility doctor with more than 30 years of experience in his field. He practiced in vitro fertilization in the US and Europe, wrote several books on the topic, and even co-founded the Center for Advanced Genetics Fertility Clinic in Carlsbad, California with his wife, Susan. During the early morning hours one day in late 2016, Orange County deputies were called to the Sills residence in San Clemente, where Susan lay dead at the bottom of a staircase. Sadly, she was just 45 years old. And when questioned by the police, Sills told investigators that his wife had fallen down the stairs. Susan's cause of death wasn't immediately clear. It took more than a year for the medical examiner to classify it as a homicide. And as the lengthy investigation played out, Sills continued to practice at his clinic. But in April 2019, more than 2 years after the mysterious tragedy, prosecutors charged him with murdering his wife. As of October 2023, the case is ongoing. Authorities have declined to speculate on the nature of Susan's death or Sills' alleged motive. He remains free on bail pending the outcome of the case. In many cases, the California Medical Board is unable to take action to revoke a doctor's license in the absence of a criminal conviction to back up any claims of misconduct or being unfit to practice. But the judge overseeing Sills' case agreed that it was appropriate to ban him from practicing medicine, even though his criminal case remains unsolved. More than 7 years after Susan's death, it's still unclear whether a trial date has been set. 5. Jose Louie Perez Jr. A young Texas man named Jose Luis Perez Jr. ruined his entire future over a series of armed robberies he committed over a 12-hour period in early 2021. His crime spree began shortly after 11 p.m. on March 2nd, when he robbed a Circle K gas station at gunpoint in Friendswood. Perez proceeded to rob an adult store in Webster before returning to the same Circle K he'd held up earlier. Then he robbed the place a second time. He also robbed a Chevron gas station and several individuals, including a worker who was painting a house. Police identified Perez as the culprit with help from witnesses who were able to provide them with a description of the suspect's vehicle and his license plate number. He attempted to outrun law enforcement, but the chase ended when he lost control of his car and crashed into a median. Perez fled on foot with the gun he'd used to commit the robberies and dumped the weapon before pursuing officers caught up with him. Federal and state authorities charged Perez with a litany of crimes. He ended up pleading guilty in federal court to 4 counts each of interference with commerce by robbery and brandishing a firearm. And for the robberies, he received a 36-month prison sentence, along with 336 months for the gun charges, amounting to a grand total of 372 months, or 31 years, followed by 5 years of probation. In a statement, U.S. Attorney Alamander Hamdani commented on how Perez has thrown most of his life away and how he'll likely be an old man before he sees freedom again. 4. Belle Gibson. People love a feel-good success story, and that's what they got from Australian wellness influencer Belle Gibson, who designed a popular healthy living app called The Whole Pantry in 2013. It was rated as Australia's top food and drink app that year and helped lead to a deal with Lantern Books to publish her cookbook. And around that same time, Gibson began working with Apple to create a version of the Whole Pantry app for the Apple Watch. By early 2015, sales associated with her brand had exceeded $1 million, and it seemed like profits were on track to continue growing. Gibson's followers were inspired by her continued plans to expand her brand, especially after she claimed that she was suffering from blood, spleen, brain, uterus, and liver cancer. In her book, she wrote that she'd first battled cancer 6 years earlier at the age of 20. Doctors told her it was terminal and that she had just 6 weeks to live. Yet she miraculously pulled through and made a full recovery. The young woman's story began to fall apart, though, in early 2015, when several charities that she'd promised large donations to said they hadn't received any money. It sparked a series of events that eventually led to speculation that Gibson was lying about a multitude of things, including having cancer. Shortly after the allegations began to surface, Gibson came clean during an interview with Australia Women's Weekly. She admitted that none of the cancer stories were true and said that she hoped people would understand she was human. But the word sorry was conspicuously absent from her vocabulary that day. During another interview with 60 Minutes, Gibson made remarks that caused people to question who she even was, or how old she was. She admitted to changing her name several times and refused to reveal her real age. Needless to say, Gibson lost her deal with Apple. Her app was shut down, and her wellness brand floundered. She was fined $410,000 for failing to fulfill her promised donations to charity. But the Australian government has been unable to recoup any of the money. Her current whereabouts and activities are unclear, but it's likely safe to assume she regrets ruining her career with lies, especially since she seemed perfectly capable of making money without telling fake stories. 3. Robert Bashara. 56-year-old Robert Bashara was a successful businessman from the Detroit area who lived in an upscale community with his wife Jane and their 2 kids. He was active in local charities, served as the president of his local Rotary Club, volunteered at his kids' sport games, and was a regular at his church, where he sometimes worked as an usher. But Bashara's long-standing image as an all-American family man was called into question in early 2012. when Jane was found beaten and strangled to death inside her vehicle in a Detroit alley. Bashara denied any involvement in his wife's murder, but investigators suspected him of hiring his intellectually disabled handyman, Joseph Gentz, to kill Jane. According to prosecutors, Gentz had an IQ of 50. He confessed to the crime and was being held in jail when Bashara was busted for trying to have him murdered several months later. Bashara pleaded guilty to solicitation of murder and was sentenced to 80 months to 20 years in prison. Later on, in early 2013, Gentz pleaded guilty to second-degree murder for killing Jane and was sentenced to 17 to 28 years behind bars. Then, a few months after that, Bashara was charged for his involvement in his wife's death. During his trial, the court heard about how Bashara had a double life, which included mistresses he met through his participation in the BDSM community. One woman who took the stand spoke about meeting up with him at a so-called dungeon that was located in the basement at one of his properties. Bashara allegedly liked to be called Master Bob and was accused of being an avid cocaine user. Prosecutors argued that Bashara wanted Jane out of the way so he could continue his secret lifestyle uninterrupted. They also believe he killed his wife so he could collect on an $800,000 insurance policy he'd taken out in Jane's name. A jury found him guilty of first-degree murder and several other charges, and as a result, he was sentenced to life without parole. Bashara passed away in 2020 at the age of 62. His health had deteriorated in his final years, which he spent in the confines of a state prison rather than the comfort of his own home. 2. Cathy Bernstein and Trane, Greenland. While on routine patrol in Newport, Wales in 2020, police officers noticed a suspicious interaction outside an apartment building between two young women who were parked outside in a car and a man who came outside and spoke with them briefly before going back inside. Suspecting that they'd just witnessed a drug sale, the cops searched the vehicle and found bags of cocaine, a large amount of cash, and 2 cell phones. Police identified the suspects as 29-year-old Cathy Bernstein and her girlfriend of 5 years, 30-year-old Trane, Greenland. Both women had well-paying day jobs, came from good families, and were known for being intelligent and hardworking. But a search of their phones revealed that they owned a several $1,000 drug debt for their runaway cocaine habit. They were working off the debt by dealing drugs, and their addiction had taken over their lives completely. During the suspects' court proceedings for multiple drug-related charges, the judge mentioned how the women could have qualified for a bank loan to pay off their debt, which would have been better than owing money to a drug dealer. Trane, Greenland's attorney, Kevin Seal, said that his client might have considered doing that in a sober state of mind, but she was caught in the throes of her addiction. Cathy Bernstein's lawyer described her drug-fueled crimes as very out of character and said that she saw selling drugs as a way out. He also claimed that the young woman was embarrassed and ashamed of her actions. While imposing a 2-year and 8-month sentence on both defendants for possession with intent to distribute, the judge described how Bernstein and Greenland had good careers, were in a stable relationship, and had a nice future to look forward to. One can only hope that there is hope for the women's futures, and that they'll use their time in prison to turn their lives around. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. 1. Cain Velasquez. In 2022, former UFC heavyweight champion Cain Velasquez embarked on an 11-mile or 17.7-kilometer high-speed chase in an attempt to capture a man who was accused of assaulting one of his relatives. Harry Goulart was on his way to get fitted with an ankle monitor in Santa Clara County, California, after being charged in connection with the case when Velasquez allegedly rammed his vehicle and fired a gun in his direction. But the bullet missed Goulart and struck his 63-year-old father-in-law, Paul Bender, who was injured but survived. Velasquez faces an attempted first-degree murder charge. which could put him in prison for at least 20 years if convicted. He was also charged with 1 count of shooting at a motor vehicle, 3 counts of assault with a firearm, 3 counts of assault with a deadly weapon, 1 count of willfully discharging a firearm from a vehicle, and 1 count of carrying a loaded firearm with intent to commit a felony. 8 months after the shooting, after denying bail multiple times, the judge allowed Velasquez to bail out of jail for $1 million. He pleaded not guilty to the charges and remains free while awaiting trial, which has been delayed 5 times and is currently scheduled for early 2024. In the meantime, Velasquez has returned to the fighting ring. Harry Goulart is accused of doing horrific things to his victim, and Velasquez's outrage is understandable. But by taking the situation into his own hands instead of letting it play out in court, the pro wrestler has potentially destroyed his own life. Velasquez has received overwhelming support from the public, but this doesn't guarantee that the court will feel the same way. Speaking with the MMA fighting website, expert attorney Steve Cooley said that it's not a valid legal defense for a person to argue that they shot at someone for hurting a person they care about. Cooley, who's not connected with the case, said that a plea deal might be the best option for Velasquez. But only time will tell whether the fighter becomes receptive to the idea, or if he'll remain intent on fighting the charges.
Number 10. Fleeing in an Uber. In 2021, an Uber driver in Miami was charged as being an accessory to a hit and run after helping the driver who committed the crime escape. Sharon Martinez Lazaro, 27 years old, drove her Dodge Charger directly at a homeless woman, nearly running her over, then hit a tree and crashed into a storefront. Sharon then got out of her vehicle wearing a long dress and heels, and she called for an Uber. The homeless woman picked up her belongings and ran away. Sharon took her suitcase from the trunk of her ruined car, then she sat patiently and waited for an Uber to come pick her up so that she could flee the scene of the crime. It took a while for the Uber to arrive, and a crowd of concerned citizens had gathered. As Sharon calmly walked away as if nothing had happened, the crowd yelled that she needed to stay and talk to the police. Sharon got into her Uber anyway, ignoring the angry mob, and the driver left the scene. The folks in the crowd had enough video evidence for the police to track down Sharon and the driver both. Sharon was arrested and charged with fleeing the scene of an accident and property damage. The driver, Bobby Stone, was charged with accessory after the fact. He knew she was trying to flee an accident, and he helped her do it anyway. Number 9. Walmart horror. For Justin Wade Gardner, 2023 started off violently. As Justin drove through the parking lot of a Walmart supercenter, he was overcome by a sudden urge to cause chaos. Justin smashed his car into 8 other vehicles and intentionally tried to run 2 women over. As he went through the parking lot, he purposely struck 2 pedestrians with his vehicle in an attempt to apparently murder them. Then, as he tried to flee the scene of his botched murders, he crashed into 8 different cars. 4 of the cars had people in them, but 4 weren't even moving. South Carolina state troopers believe Justin may have driven to the Walmart specifically to look for victims. One of his victims was Caitlin Hummel. She told local news that Justin drove into the car return stand, jarring it out of place but missing her. He hit the cart return so hard that it dislodged, bumping into Caitlin. Realizing he had missed his opportunity, the driver then went for another woman and hit her hard enough to knock the lady off her feet. There was an explosion of chaos in the Walmart parking lot, and Justin tried to flee the scene before he was pulled out of his vehicle by an angry mob. That was when he hit the 8 cars as he tried to pull off and escape. The police soon caught up to Justin and made the arrest. He has already been charged with 4 counts of assault and battery and trying to flee the scene of an accident. Number 8. Chris Soules. Chris Soules enjoyed a brief 15 minutes of fame when he starred in the 19th season of The Bachelor. Maybe it was a little longer than 15 minutes, but his fame has dried up ever since he tried to flee the scene of a fatal crash. In Iowa in 2017, Chris slammed his tractor-trailer into another vehicle, killing the other driver. Chris didn't immediately run away from the scene. First, he administered CPR to the victim, then he called 911, and he even waited for the paramedics to arrive. It was the police that seemed to freak Chris out because he made sure to leave before they arrived. But he had already given out his name, and so it didn't take long for the police to track him down and arrest him. This started a chain reaction of events that left Chris short millions of dollars and being sentenced to 2 years in prison. Chris originally managed to avoid a trial by demoting the charge from fleeing the scene of a deadly accident to leaving the scene of a personal injury accident. The lesser charge knocked 3 years off the potential prison sentence. Then a wrongful death lawsuit was placed against Chris by the family of the victim, Kenneth Mosher. Chris and his parents shelled out $2.5 million in damages. And finally, 2 years after that day in April, when Chris's radical driving killed a person, he was sentenced. Judge Andrea Dreyer gave the former bachelor a suspended sentence of 2 years in prison, meaning he wouldn't have to serve time behind bars. He was also given 2 years of probation and ordered to pay a fine of $625. Number 7. Self-snitching car. In 2015, Cathy Bernstein crashed into a truck and a van, then fled the scene. According to police, Cathy was driving her Ford vehicle along Northwest Prima Vista Boulevard in Port Lucie, Florida, when she rammed into the side of the truck and the van. Her airbag went off, hitting her in the face and obscuring her view. But she still hit the gas pedal and sped away from the scene. At first, it looked like Cathy was going to make a clean getaway. However, she was betrayed by her own vehicle. Cathy was on her way to an easy escape when her car's 911 assist system connected her car telephone directly to the police. The system is designed to respond to an accident and automatically call the cops. The whole point of the system is to send response vehicles in the case the driver is unconscious or unable to phone the authorities themselves. In this case, the car gave the cops Cathy's exact location and all her personal details. Now unintentionally on the phone with the 911 operator, Cathy tried to talk her way out of it. She insisted that she had not been involved in a car accident, saying her car had not been hit at all. However, police officers saw through her lies. They already knew an accident had taken place and that someone had fled the scene, and they had her exact location. The police met Cathy at her own home, where her damaged Ford car was parked outside, with the airbag still inflated. Even still, Cathy tried to deny that she was in any kind of hit and run. She claimed she hit a tree, even though she had damaged the front and back of her vehicle. In the end, there was just no way for Cathy to talk her way out of it. She was charged with a hit and run and taken to St. Lucie County Jail. Number 6. Rundown in Vegas. In September of 2016, a man was wanted for questioning in connection to a shooting. As the individual was driving his vehicle through Las Vegas, detectives tried to stop him in the area along US 95. It was believed that several days earlier the man got into a shootout in a mobile home park 2 miles, 3.2 kilometers away, and almost killed somebody. There was no warrant out for the individual's arrest, but detectives were fairly certain he was the man who pulled the trigger. When they tried to pull him over, he panicked. And that was when everything went horribly wrong. The man immediately hit the gas and tried to escape the police. He led them on a brief chase northbound on US 95, got off on Boulder Highway, and made his way back onto the freeway. That was when he lost control of his vehicle and smashed into a wall. With his car ruined, the man got out on foot and tried to flee across the northbound lane. As he ran, he was mowed down by a semi-tractor trailer and killed. All he needed to do was stop his car and let the police talk to him, but instead he ran out into traffic and died. Number 5. Losing the loot. A man walked into a Mike's Sub restaurant in 2018 in Rancho Bernardo, San Diego, pistol-whipped an employee and ran off with some cash. But the thief's getaway didn't go quite as planned. He dropped his loot as he tried to flee the scene and wound up getting away with nothing. The incident began a little after 10:45 p.m. An employee was closing up the restaurant when the suspect entered through the back door. The robber forced the employee to open the cash register, then forced the employee to open the safe. The thief received a whole heap of money in an envelope, hit the employee with his gun for no reason, then took off out the back door. The victim suffered a nasty laceration to their head but was otherwise okay, minus the trauma. But then the thief's whole plan fell apart. As he attempted to flee, he ran straight into a pillar, dropping his money everywhere. The suspect was so panicked to escape that he left his money scattered on the ground and took off across a pedestrian bridge. Last we heard, the police never even caught him. He wore dark pants, black running shoes, a black bandana, and a black hoodie pulled tight around his face. He may have escaped without facing any charges, but he left behind his stolen cash. Number 4. Driving the dollar van. In March of 2020, a man driving a dollar van plowed his vehicle directly into the back of a cyclist. The accident happened near the intersection of Avenue U and Flatbush Avenue in Brooklyn around 5 p.m. It's not clear why the driver hit the cyclist, but he definitely tried to get away after. He slammed into the back of the bike, sending the cyclist flying over his handlebars to be crushed under the wheels of the minibus. Then 42-year-old Kwadwo Fozu tried to make a desperate escape. He hit the gas, hightailed it out of there, but was immediately apprehended by witnesses. Good Samaritans saw what happened, blocked the guy in, and held him under citizen's arrest until the police showed up. According to the cops, the cyclist was in critical condition, but not deceased. The driver was booked and charged with aggravated unlicensed operation of a vehicle. He didn't even have the proper license to be driving the dollar van. He was also charged with leaving the scene of an accident and failure to use caution. Number 3. Moped Fireball. In September of 2022, a man on a moped tried to flee the scene of a crime, got into a police chase, and drove his moped into the side of an NYPD patrol car in Queens. The accident happened in the early hours of Friday morning, following a shootout. As the suspect fled the scene of the shooting, police gave chase. They got into a position where they could block traffic and box the driver of the moped in. But instead of slowing down or trying to avoid the blockade, the guy on the moped drove straight into the side of a cop car and exploded in a massive ball of fire. The moped's gas tank ruptured and the whole thing exploded on impact. The driver was propelled over the handlebars and into the police cruiser like a crash test dummy. After that, the suspect curled up on the ground in a fetal position as he started to catch fire. Good Samaritans and NYPD officers pulled the driver out of the flames, likely saving his life. He was then taken to the hospital and treated for minor injuries. The moped was left scorched and ruined, and the NYPD car was black and charred, as if it had been hit by a meteor. Number 2. To steal a catalytic converter. In Cumberland County, Pennsylvania, a suspected catalytic converter thief accidentally ran over his partner as the pair tried to flee the scene of a crime. It happened around 6 in the morning on a Saturday in late 2022. Pennsylvania State Police received a report of a pedestrian accident. When troopers arrived, eyewitnesses said 2 men tried to strip a catalytic converter from a car outside a man's house. They were interrupted when the owner came outside and confronted them. Both suspects tried to flee the scene, and that was when one of them ran over their partner in a pickup truck. As if the getaway couldn't have gone any worse, one of the thieves left his injured partner behind. The one that ran over the other one took off and left his body on the ground for the police to find. The cops identified the injured suspect as James Edward Snyder, who was taken to the hospital before being charged. The other one got away, and there have been no reports of his capture. Number 1. Big rig hit and run. In 2016, the driver of a big rig found himself in serious trouble after running a red light in Vernon, California, and crashing into a vehicle. The big rig went straight through the red light at the intersection near 37th Street and Santa Fe Avenue just after 3 in the morning. Vernon police say the driver collided with a pickup truck, hitting it so hard the pickup got lodged underneath the big rig's trailer. The driver desperately wanted to escape, but wasn't getting very far with a crushed truck stuck under the trailer. So they took the time to unhook the trailer from the cab, then they made their getaway. The driver left the trailer sitting on the crushed truck and fled the scene. When the police arrived, they were shocked to find 2 people stuck in the truck and trapped by the detached trailer. The driver was removed and transported to the USC Medical Center. Unfortunately, though, the passenger of the truck was already deceased. Police found the big rig shortly after, about a mile from the scene. They released the name of Guillermo Ortiz Jr. as the main person of interest, although it was never confirmed who was in the driver's seat. The Vernon detective sergeant called the driver's actions brazen, saying he could have easily stayed and helped the people in the pickup, but instead he took the time to unhitch the trailer and take off.
These days, many employers perform background checks on potential candidates and do their own research by looking the person up online. When it comes to scoring jobs, would you rather have a felony on your record Or have Google searches of your name turn up the most damaging details of your work history, including things you would avoid mentioning in an interview? Let us know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.